Hello, this is Dan Humberg, representing harvestfires.com. This video is a review of the CAD or computer-aided design model of a tin set, in this case the tin set for a Firestop kit to be mounted on a Case IH model 7230 combine. What I want to do in this video is to build up the tin set model piece by piece on the screen and talk you through what the parts are and how they go together, and give you as many pointers as I can about how to install them. What you should be seeing on your screen is the lower left part of the tin set that goes underneath the left side of the manifold, the exhaust manifold. So it's just a flat piece with a tab bent up on it here that has a hole in it, and another tab here that's going to overlap the next piece we'll install. So this piece would be one of the first pieces that you'd install. It'll slide in underneath the left side of the manifold. This tab here on the right hand side would probably be right underneath the exhaust turbine, and it'll connect to the next piece. What you note here is that there's a hole in this tab that's bent up at 90 degrees. There's a hole in the block between two of the exhaust ports there, where this should fit up in that space and up against a flat milled surface on the block, and we should be able to put either a bolt, or I usually try to remember to ship button head cap screws. They're little round head like bolts with a socket head, a hex head recess in it, so that you can reach in with this little short bolt on the end of a Allen wrench and screw it in through that hole. I think that it's a 10 millimeter cap screw. I could be wrong, it could be 8 millimeter, but I think it's a 10 millimeter bolt. And if I remember, I'd put two of those in the kit, one for this side and one for the right hand side. In the case of the install, you'd put this piece under there and put that bolt in there, and you could bring it in. It'll probably go in kind of hard because there's probably paint in that hole on the block. You don't necessarily need to make it rock hard tight to hold this on. You could just get it in there so that it's very snug and holds this in against the block, but you still have a little bit of play in the part in terms of moving it. That might be beneficial to make sure that we can get the whole thing together. It'll hold it onto the block even if it isn't super tight. But let's start with it in there close as first, and then let's add another piece here and talk about what we do next. There, that's correct. They just barely overlap here where this tab is. And now you can see the one on the right hand side here also has a tab that sticks up. Same way, it's going to go between two of the exhaust ports on the block, and there will be a hole there that should match up, and you should be able to get this cap screw in as well. You might have to bend this tab part way down, be able to reach in and put that cap screw in there, and then bend the tab back up. The other thing I'll point out here while we're in this location is you've got a place where these overlap, and there's a place for a screw here. You may want to reach underneath with a little stubby screwdriver and put a screw up through this to hold these two together, because it will space them correctly so that everything will pull together later on correctly if you have that screw in there to space them apart. Once that screw is in there and they're spaced correctly apart, you may be able to snug up these two cap screws that hold it onto the block a little bit more, because we should be in the right location at that point, I believe. Once those cap screws are on there, you may wish to take this screw back out, because later on there's going to be another piece that goes underneath there that needs to overlap that spot. But putting the screw through there will locate these two together so that you get they're spread apart the correct amount when you put these cap screws in the block there to hold it on. So that's the first two pieces. Let's add on the next piece. Here we go. This is, I don't know the number of the piece, I'm not sure of that, I don't recall that right now, but this piece on the left end of the manifold. And while we're doing that, we can bring in the matching piece on the right side. That piece will go in on the right hand side. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to add the top piece as well that connects them. Okay, so we've got three pieces here, and I actually think you probably could assemble these three pieces together. You probably could take this one that I'm highlighting right now, screw him onto the blue piece, the top piece. From there's set of screws that go in through the top here, and also connect that top piece onto this gold colored piece on the right. You may be able to put those three together and lower this whole three assembly down on top of the well, down to this bottom piece that we've already got bolted onto the block. Now, having said that, I'm going to rotate this around so we can look at the bottom of it. It may be difficult to get this gray piece to slide down with these flanges folded on the bottom, and so it may or may not be possible to drop those three screwed together vertically down on there and get it between. I guess the reason that it's so tight there is because we've got the exhaust manifold there, and I've got the compressor turbine is right outside here, and there's the rubber oil or rubber air line that leaves that is here, so it may be a somewhat tight space there. But if you can slide that flange, that 1-inch flange back here that I'm pointing to now, if you can slide that back down between the rubber air line and the get it to fit it in there, you may be able to drop these three pieces down. If not, we have to do them one at a time on there. Okay, let's get this rotated around so we can see it correctly again. Okay. In any case, once we have the bottom two pieces in place, you could put this piece on, the gray one on, slide it in place, put a couple screws through the bottom and hold it on, or all of the screws through the bottom. Similarly with this one, you could slide it in place and screw it. This one screws from the face on here rather than from the bottom. It's hard to get at this to put screws in through the face. That's why I had you reach underneath and do it. And then the blue piece could go on the top. That part will be easy once these others are in place. But those would be the first pieces to go on. Let's see what comes next. I believe the next piece I would put on would be this one, and it will slide down over the top of the turbocharger bearing here. And if we get it in place correctly, we've got a hole here and a screw to put in. That one you should be able to reach through with a long driver bit. That will go, actually you got your compressor turbine is going to be right here, but there is a space between the two, so we should be able to reach through with a long driver bit and get that one on here. This one back here may be more of a challenge. It does look like there's enough space here. You may be able to get in there with I don't know if you can get in there with the long driver bit or maybe that little stubby bit, but try to get that screw in to hold this piece on as well. Two will do it, but it'd be really nice to get both of those screws on to hold that piece in place. With those two screws on, we can add the next piece. This piece will slide up from underneath, and now we have a cutout here that will surround the turbocharger bearing. This one, notice it slides on the inside of the light blue one here, and there are a series of holes. This one here, if we're lucky, you can reach behind the the exhaust turbine this way with a long driver bit behind here from the right hand side and get this screw in. The other one is meant to go through from the outside from the left to right here, and you may be able to reach again with a long driver bit in between the junk that's out here and this face here, and with a long driver bit and get that one in coming from our left here now to the right. Also, I've got two holes here the screw will go through from the side we're looking at here from right to left and hold these two together. I hope that one or both of those screws will hit a recess in or a space or miss the compressor turbine, which is right over here. So I anticipate that one of the two will be able to fit in there. If they don't, if they go through and they hit the compressor turbine, you may need to shoot through another screw. It'd be nice to have those two lined up, so you could put a screw through far enough to line them up, make sure they're pulled together in the right spot, and then shoot another screw through as a self-drilling tapping screw through both of these to get this held together. But eventually we have to hit a space where a screw nests into a recess in this compressor housing here. If you hit the housing, it'll push this whole thing off that face of that housing, and that's not what we want to do. So that's why I've got a couple of holes here, and they're very near the outside edge. This one may clear the outside of the housing. This one may go into a recess. If that doesn't, you can try and hit another one in here. Okay, that part, with those two together, we can go on. Okay, this dark gold piece now. We'll slide in from the lower left, or lower right, I'm sorry, or maybe just slide. It has to, you can go underneath, the exhaust turbine is right in here, so that's what we're going around. This can slide underneath that exhaust turbine and come up here, but it will have to come in a little bit from the right because you have these two openings in it here. These are for the oil lines that serve the turbocharger bearing. There's a hard one, a steel one, that will come up through this oval hole here, come over the top of the bearing and serve the turbocharger bearing. This larger cutout is for the line that returns back to the crankcase with the oil from that bearing. It's a larger pipe or tube. Notice that there are pedals cut in here, and that allows you to take a pliers, needle nose pliers, and bend these pedals. The gray ones I'd probably bend up. The gold ones I would bend down so that they don't interfere with each other. But I tend to bend a little. First, you want to test to see whether it fits correctly in there and see whether the oil line actually comes up through the center of this. Sometimes we find that that oil line is shifted a little bit, or they assembled it slightly differently, or they just changed the design, or my tin isn't perfect, either one, so that it wants to bump into the edge of this. And so then you may need to bend some of these to make it clear. You also could end up cutting tin out of here with a tin snips, but hopefully the hole is close enough to the right location you don't have to do that. But the pedals allow you to bend the tin so that it parallels the line instead of points at the line. I really don't want the edges of this tin touching that oil line, or even have the possibility of touching it, because the laser cuts this and leaves kind of a, it's not real sharp, but it's a hard edge on the tin, and I don't want that vibrating against your oil line. I don't want it to possibly cut through that or abrade it so that it might someday leak. So if you bend these up or down a little bit, then you have a flat face, and if that ever touches the oil line, it's not going to bother it. So make sure it has a little bit of clearance around here, around that tube, so that we aren't going to hurt it. Same thing is true of the one that comes up through here, that steel one. Make sure we have a little bit of clearance around there and bend these tabs as necessary to accomplish that. And then once you have it assembled, you can come back and use some of that foil tape to tighten up these holes from underneath or behind or inside if you can reach it, but probably from behind, so that we don't lose an inordinate volume of air around these two tubes. We're going to lose some air, but we want it spread around through the enclosure and not dump it all out the same spots. Now here it looks like a big hole, but that surrounds the turbocharger bearing, and this whole flat surface will be up against the face of the compressor turbine, so we aren't going to lose a lot of air there. Once you have this piece put in place and you have to make sure that these holes fit those oil lines, then you can screw it on. There's a couple of screws here that are intended to reach behind and get the screws on, so that you'd reach up behind with my little stubby screwdriver, pull a screw up through there and through here. The rest of these I believe you can reach from the bottom underneath with a hand driver or possibly a power driver. And then you can put screws through the outside here on this face as well. You may want to leave these two open right now for now when you put it on the machine, because there's a tab that folds down over here from above, and that will probably cover over those two screws. Let's go to the next part. Okay. I'm showing this dark blue piece here as the next one. You actually could put that one and the font one to follow. You could put those on before this orange one here, this or this, whatever we call this one. So the order, I'm not sure it would matter a lot. This one probably will go in place easily now, but the one in below it may be best to put this bottom one on after these two. So this piece is going to screw on to this side here with a screw right here and a screw down here. Those two will locate it. Those are easy to get on. They'll go in place pretty easily. This one real easily. This one you may have to reach back with a long driver to try and get it. You also could probably go underneath it, that little stubby driver maybe, and reach it, but I think you can reach over the top of the I hope you can reach over the top of the turbo pipe and get this one in, the exhaust pipe, and get this one in. Anyway, we got two screws there to hold that one on. Let's go to the next piece. Okay, this one goes on the outside of this blue one, and it fits inside of this one. That's why I say it may be easier to put the bottom one on later or after these two, but you can probably slide this one in place underneath here. Let's see, if we put this on here, then we got 1, 2 screws here that you can see that I'm pointing at to hold it on, and one back here. Don't put screws in the rest of these yet. They're for something else. In fact, this one up here, this one I'd probably leave that one alone. Just use a screw here for now and a screw back here for now to hold this on. Once it's in place there, then you can come through and put screws in underneath to fill in the rest of this. Also, I didn't point out, but once you have this, whatever you call this, brownish gold piece on here, you can come underneath. Again, you may have to do that and reach under there with your hand and that small stubby driver and fit screws in these 3 holes to hold it onto the manifold cover. So with that piece in place, you can put screws around here. Again, leave these top 2 on this face open for now. Then we'll put the top cover on next, and you'll see how that covers over the rest of this. Okay, this royal blue piece that goes on top here, that'll be easy to fit on. Probably you can start screwing it on back here and along any of these holes on the top. What I would point out is that when you get it wrapped down around here, you have 2 screws here and here, and these tabs that fold down. And you also have this tab highlighted, and then the one on the piece underneath it that will bend out. I show them bent out in this view, and you may need to bend them out to fit around. There's a bracket for the wastegate actuator on your exhaust turbine that comes through here. You want to fold these tabs up or down so that they fit as tight as possible against that bracket that serves the wastegate actuator on the exhaust turbine, and you may need to use some of that foil tape around them to tighten this up as well. And it's possible that I don't have these designed perfectly. If necessary, you can cut them with a tin snip so that they also fit better, but they should provide at least a good starting point to fitting around that bracket. It's a really difficult thing to measure in 3 dimensions to know that it's going to fit just right around there, but I think we'll be close enough that you can make it work with this. So that's what those are for. On the right side here now, as we get this screwed together, we've got a bunch of holes here that allows air to come out from around the exhaust turbine into the exhaust pipe that's going to go up towards your muffler. So those are the pieces. Now at this point, if you're putting it on the machine, you've got the exhaust manifold and the exhaust turbine enclosed. Now we just need to do the rest of the exhaust pipe system. And that would be the lower part of that exhaust pipe enclosure. When we fold it up, we notice it looks like an octagon when you look down this way, except that part of it's missing. So that's that lower piece. You can also see how these these flanges down here meet up against that box that we've already assembled, and they should match up so that you know where to put it on. If these edges will line up here and around here, then you know you've got it in the right spot, and you can start putting screws through to hold that on. It's a little difficult to reach these screws in the back. That long driver bit should help some with that. But I believe you'll be able to. This one, I know you can get. These two are tight, but you should be able to get to them as well. So we can bring that up against this face, put the screws around there. I think you can put all the screws around that if you can, that you can reach anyway. And then we go on to the next piece. Okay, there we have that piece shown on top where it goes. Similar to the piece underneath, it's part of an octagon, has tabs that should lie in a plane here that go up against the face of this enclosure, and we can screw them on there. It does have a couple of holes, 1, 2, 3 back here, that will go through the orange part into the tab on the blue part that's highlighted there. These two are hard to reach. You may be able to get them with that little stubby driver back in there and get a screw started in there. Those are ones you're going to want to have put together on the bench so that the screws know where they're going when they get in there. This one up here is easier to reach because you got more space. And they go screw together here and along here as well in the front, so that it ties this whole thing together. And we've got this big hole that will surround your DEF injection port where the diesel exhaust fluid is squirted into your exhaust system. Let's put the pieces on that go around that. There we go. And now you can see the last two pieces. These are kind of patches that go over that, and they're there to allow us to tighten up the space around that diesel injection port. That diesel injection port the case uses has a stainless steel shield underneath it that's kind of a most complex shape, but it's a crimped thing that they squish in place, or squish and then put in place. I think it's a heat shield to keep the heat from damaging the injection pieces. And I've cut pedals in these patches, so and you may need to enlarge this opening here. I've tried to make it about the size I think it needs to be, but if these pedals are too long and they bump into the injection port thing underneath there, you may need to shorten them up a little bit and enlarge this hole. But the idea is that you can bend these pedals down and in to funnel underneath that shield that case has. So their shield is on the outside and our pieces tuck underneath that. And once you can tuck them in there and then get these holes to line up to screw it on, you'll get it put together, and it'll reduce the amount of air that could leak out around the injection port. You can also put some tape around there, that foil tape, to tighten this up if necessary, but this should not be too hard to fit these pedals under there so you can get it put together. Then you screw these last two pieces on by screwing them around the perimeter to the two enclosure that we've got here. If I look at the end, you've also got pedals on the end of this. You can fold down, like you can see that this one is folded under, this one's folded under. These four are folded in first, and then these others fold in around them. This tightens up into a hole about the size of your exhaust pipe, so allows you to tighten that up around that exhaust pipe so that we don't dump all of the air out in one spot. We kind of want to keep a little bit of pressure inside this enclosure with the clean air so that it's forced to go to all parts of the enclosure. And this should work reasonably well. I don't see on this one, I believe that the parts that you have also have keyhole cutouts here and here, and maybe in a couple other places. You open them up by bending them down here a little bit so that they allow some air to come out the ends along the manifold here, and it forces air to flow to all parts of the enclosure there rather than becoming stagnant in there. And the air blast is coming from left to right here. It will loft over those little tabs and create a little bit of an airfoil effect and pull some of the air out of the box at those locations and keep it flowing there without letting dust back in, I believe. So that's the box for the enclosure around your hot components on the exhaust on the 7230. This hole up on top is where your takeoff fitting will go in to to bring the air into the box from our blower and filter. There's a HVAC fitting that goes in there and has fingers. You bend a few of them out that stay on the outside, and then bend the rest of the fingers underneath the inside to hold it on. And then there's what it was called a flex 90, swivel or flex 90, that you can reshape a little bit to reroute the air on the way up here and get it where you want it, and then connect onto your the first rubber fitting that goes over the top of the valve cover. So those go together on here, and then you put some of that foil tape over the joints in that, screw the tabs down onto the top here with self-drilling screws to hold that on, and then tape over that whole thing so we don't lose air on the way into the box. We want it all to go inside that box. So there's the system, the enclosure for the Case IH 7230 model combine for a Firestop kit. I believe we've covered all the essential things. These slots up on top are for 8mm bolts to hold it onto the block. There will be threaded holes that you should be able to line up in the center of each one of these and put a bolt through there to hold the top of the enclosure on. Between those 4 and the 2 that went underneath, there you can see the one that's highlighted there, and there's one back here somewhere that between the bolts on top and the bolts on the bottom here, it's held onto the system pretty tightly. Okay. So call me if you have trouble, or watch the video again and see if that doesn't explain it. That plus the video on how to assemble it on the bench, we talked through some of this stuff. So good luck with your installation and have a safe harvest.